Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. Chapter 1. Regulating Popular Force. Force, when unregulated or ill-regulated, is not merely dissipated into the void, akin to gunpowder consumed in the open air or steam unconfined by science. Rather, striking within the obscurity, its blows meeting only the air, it recoils to bruise itself. It constitutes destruction and ruin. It is the volcano, the earthquake, the cyclone. It is not growth and progress. It is Polyphemus blinded, striking indiscriminately, and falling headlong among the jagged rocks by the impetus of his own blows. The blind force of the people is a force that must be husbanded, and also administered, just as the blind force of steam, lifting ponderous iron arms and turning vast wheels, is compelled to bore and rifle the cannon and to weave the most delicate lace. It must be regulated by intellect. Intellect is to the people and the people's force what the slender needle of the compass is to the ship. Its soul, ever counseling the immense mass of wood and iron, and ever pointing to the north. To assail the citadels erected on all sides against the human race by superstitions, despotisms, and prejudices, the force must possess a brain and a law. Then, its deeds of daring produce permanent results, and real progress ensues. Then, there are sublime conquests. Thought is a force, and philosophy should be an energy, finding its aim and its effects in the amelioration of mankind. The two great motors are truth and love. When all these forces are combined, and guided by the intellect, and regulated by the rule of right and justice, and of combined and systematic movement and effort, the great revolution prepared for by the ages will commence its march. The power of the deity himself is in equilibrium with his wisdom. Hence, the only results are harmony. It is because force is ill-regulated that revolutions prove failures. Therefore, it is that so often insurrections, descending from those high mountains that dominate the moral horizon, justice, wisdom, reason, right, built of the purest snow of the ideal after a long descent from rock to rock, after having reflected the sky in their transparency and having been swollen by 100 affluents in the majestic path of triumph, suddenly lose themselves in quagmires, like a California river in the sands. The onward march of the human race requires that the heights surrounding it should blaze with noble and enduring lessons of courage. Deeds of daring dazzle history and form one class of the guiding lights of man. They are the stars and coruscations from that vast sea of electricity, the force inherent in the people. To strive, to brave all risks, to perish, to persevere, to be true to oneself, to grapple body to body with destiny, to surprise defeat by the little terror it inspires, now to confront unrighteous power, now to defy intoxicated triumph. These are the examples that the nations require and the light that electrifies them. There are immense forces in the great caverns of evil beneath society, in the hideous degradation, squalor, wretchedness, and destitution, vices and crimes that reek and simmer in the darkness in that populace below the people of great cities. There, disinterestedness vanishes. Everyone howls, searches, gropes, and gnaws for himself. Ideas are ignored, and of progress there is no thought. This populace has two mothers, both of them stepmothers, ignorance and misery. Want is their only guide. For the appetite alone they crave satisfaction. Yet even these may be employed. The lowly sand upon which we trample, cast into the furnace, melted, purified by fire, may become resplendent crystal. They possess the brute force of the hammer, but their blows advance the great cause when struck within the lines traced by the rule held by wisdom and discretion. Yet it is this very force of the people, this titanic power of the giants, that constructs the fortifications of tyrants and is embodied in their armies. Hence the possibility of such tyrannies as those of which it has been said that Rome smells worse under Vitellius than under Sulla. Under Claudius and under Domitian, there is a deformity of baseness corresponding to the ugliness of the tyranny. The foulness of the slaves is a direct result of the atrocious baseness of the despot. A miasma exhales from these crouching consciences that reflect the master. The public authorities are unclean, hearts are collapsed, consciences shrunken, souls puny. This is so under Caracalla, it is so under Commodus, it is so under Heliogabalus, while from the Roman Senate under Caesar, there proceeds only the rank odor peculiar to the eagle's eyrie. It is the force of the people that sustains all these despotisms, the basest as well as the best. That force acts through armies, and these oftener enslave than liberate. Despotism there applies the rule. Force is the mace of steel at the saddle-bow of the knight or of the bishop in armor. Passive obedience by force supports thrones and oligarchies, Spanish kings, and Venetian senates. Might, in an army wielded by tyranny, is the enormous sum total of utter weakness, and so humanity wages war against humanity, in despite of humanity. So a people willingly submits to despotism, and its workmen submit to be despised, and its soldiers to be whipped. Therefore, it is that battles lost by a nation are often progress attained. Less glory is more liberty. When the drum is silent, reason sometimes speaks. Tyrants use the force of the people to chain and subjugate, that is, enioke the people. Then they plow with them as men do with oxen yoked. Thus the spirit of liberty and innovation is reduced by bayonets, and principles are struck dumb by cannon shot, while the monks mingle with the troopers, and the church militant and jubilant, Catholic or Puritan, sings Te Deums for victories over rebellion. The military power, not subordinate to the civil power, again the hammer or mace of force independent of the rule, is an armed tyranny born full-grown, as Athene sprung from the brain of Zeus. It spawns a dynasty, and begins with Caesar to rot into Vitellius and Commodus. At the present day, it inclines to begin where formerly dynasties ended. Constantly the people put forth immense strength, only to end in immense weakness. The force of the people is exhausted in indefinitely prolonging things long since dead, in governing mankind by embalming old dead tyrannies of faith, restoring dilapidated dogmas, regilding faded, worm-eaten shrines, whitening and rouging ancient and barren superstitions, saving society by multiplying parasites, perpetuating superannuated institutions, enforcing the worship of symbols as the actual means of salvation, and tying the dead corpse of the past, mouth to mouth, with the living, present. Therefore, it is that it is one of the fatalities of humanity to be condemned to eternal struggles with phantoms, with superstitions, bigotries, hypocrisies, prejudices, the formulas of error, and the pleas of tyranny. Despotisms, seen in the past, become respectable, as the mountain, bristling with volcanic rock, rugged and horrid, seen through the haze of distance, is blue and smooth and beautiful. The sight of a single dungeon of tyranny is worth more to dispel illusions, to create a holy hatred of despotism, and to direct force aright, than the most eloquent volumes. The French should have preserved the Bastille as a perpetual lesson. Italy should not destroy the dungeons of the Inquisition. The force of the people maintained the power that built its gloomy cells and placed the living in their granite sepulchres. The force of the people cannot, by its unrestrained and fitful action, maintain and continue in action and existence a free government once created. That force must be circumscribed, restrained, and channeled through manifold distributions and circuitous routes to its outlets, from whence it shall emerge as the law, action, and resolution of the state, much as the sagacious Egyptian monarchs diverted the swelling waters of the Nile through a subdivision of canals, compelling the flood to fertilize rather than devastate the land. There must exist the jus et norma, the law and rule or gauge of the Constitution and statutes, within which the public force is obliged to operate. Should a breach be made in either, the great steam hammer, with its swift and ponderous blows, crushes the entire machinery to atoms, and finally, wrenching itself free, lies inert and lifeless amidst the ruin it has wrought. The force of the people or the popular will, active and exerted, symbolized by the gavel, when regulated, guided by, and acting within the limits of law and order, symbolized by the 24-inch rule, yields as its fruit liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberty regulated by law, equality of rights in the eyes of the law, and brotherhood encompassing its duties and obligations no less than its benefits. You shall soon receive instruction regarding the rough ashlar and the perfect ashlar as components of the lodge's jewels. The rough ashlar is described as a stone taken from the quarry in its rude and natural state. The perfect ashlar is defined as a stone prepared by the hands of the workman, to be adjusted by the working tools of the fellow craft. We shall not reiterate the explanations of these symbols as proffered by the York Rite. These may be perused in its printed monitors. They are declared to allude to the self-improvement of the individual craftsman, a continuation of the same superficial interpretation. The rough ashlar represents the people as a mass, rude and unorganized. The perfect ashlar or cubical stone, the symbol of perfection, represents the state. The rulers deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, the constitution and laws articulating the will of the people, and the government remaining harmonious, symmetrical, and efficient, with its powers properly distributed and duly adjusted in equilibrium. If we delineate a cube upon a plane surface thus, we perceive 3 visible faces and 9 external lines drawn between 7 points. The complete cube possesses 3 additional faces, totaling 6, 3 additional lines, totaling 12, and 1 additional point, totaling 8. As the number 12 encompasses the sacred numbers 3, 5, 7, and 3 times 3 or 9, and is produced by adding the sacred number 3 to 9, while its own 2 digits, 1 and 2, the unit or monad and the duad, when added together, yield the same sacred number 3, it was designated the perfect number, and the cube thus became the symbol of perfection, produced by force, acting by rule, and hammered in accordance with lines measured by the gauge out of the rough ashlar. It serves as an appropriate symbol of the force of the people expressed as the constitution and law of the state, and of the state itself. The 3 visible faces represent the 3 departments: the executive, which executes the laws, the legislative, which enacts the laws, and the judiciary, which interprets, applies, and enforces them between man, and between the state and the citizens. The 3 invisible faces are liberty, equality, and fraternity, the threefold soul of the state, representing its vitality, spirit, and intellect. Although Masonry neither usurps the place of nor mimics religion, prayer constitutes an essential component of our ceremonies. It is the aspiration of the soul toward the absolute and infinite intelligence, which is the one supreme deity, most feebly and inadequately characterized as an architect. Certain faculties of man are directed toward the unknown: thought, meditation, and prayer. The unknown is an ocean, of which conscience is the compass. Thought, meditation, and prayer are the great mysterious orientations of the needle. It is a spiritual magnetism that thus connects the human soul with the deity. These majestic irradiations of the soul pierce through the shadows toward the light. It is but a shallow scoff to assert that prayer is absurd because we cannot, through its means, persuade God to alter his plans. He produces foreknown and preordained effects through the instrumentality of the forces of nature, all of which are his forces. Our own powers are part of these. Our free agency and our will are forces. We do not absurdly cease our efforts to attain wealth or happiness, to prolong life, or to preserve health simply because we cannot, by any exertion, alter what is predestined. If the effort itself is predestined, it is nonetheless our effort, made of our own free will. So likewise do we pray. Will is a force. Thought is a force. Prayer is a force. Why should it not be in accordance with the law of God that prayer, like faith and love, should possess its own efficacy? Man is not to be comprehended as a starting point, nor progress as a goal without those two great forces, faith and love. Prayer is sublime. Orisons that beg and clamor are pitiful. To deny the efficacy of prayer is to deny that of faith, love, and effort. Yet the effects produced when our hand, moved by our will, casts a pebble into the ocean, never cease, and every uttered word is registered for eternity upon the invisible air. Every lodge is a temple, symbolic both as a whole and in its details. The universe itself supplied man with the model for the first temples erected to the divinity. The arrangement of the Temple of Solomon, the symbolic ornaments which constituted its chief decorations, and the vestments of the high priest, all bore reference to the order of the universe as it was then understood. The temple contained many emblems of the seasons: the sun, the moon, the planets, the constellations Ursa Major and Minor, the zodiac, the elements, and other components of the cosmos. It is the master of this lodge of the universe, Hermes, of whom Kurum is the representative, who constitutes one of the lights of the lodge. For further instruction regarding the symbolism of the heavenly bodies, the sacred numbers, and the temple and its details, you must wait patiently until you advance in Masonry, in the interim exercising your intellect in studying them independently. To study and seek to interpret correctly the symbols of the universe is the province of the sage and the philosopher. It is to decipher the handwriting of God and to penetrate into his thoughts. This is what is asked and answered in our catechism with regard to the lodge. A lodge is defined as an assemblage of Freemasons, duly congregated, possessing the sacred writings, square and compass, along with a charter or warrant of constitution authorizing them to labor. The room or place in which they meet, representing a portion of King Solomon's temple, is also termed the lodge. It is this which we now consider. It is said to be supported by three great columns: wisdom, force or strength, and beauty, represented by the master, the senior warden, and the junior warden. These are said to be the columns that support the lodge because wisdom, strength, and beauty are the perfections of all things, and nothing can endure without them. For, according to the York Rite, it is necessary that there should be wisdom to conceive, strength to support, and beauty to adorn all great and important undertakings. Know ye not, asks the Apostle Paul, that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? If any man desecrate the temple of God, him shall God destroy, for the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are. The wisdom and power of the deity exist in equilibrium. The laws of nature and the moral laws are not mere despotic mandates of his omnipotent will. For were they so, they might be altered by him, causing order to become disorder, good and right to become evil and wrong, honesty and loyalty to become vices, and fraud, ingratitude, and vice to become virtues. Omnipotent power, infinite and existing in isolation, would not necessarily be constrained to consistency. Its decrees and laws could not be immutable. The divine laws are not binding upon us merely because they are the enactments of his power or the expressions of his will, but rather because they manifest his infinite wisdom. They are not righteous simply because they are his laws. Rather, they are his laws because they are righteous. From the equilibrium of infinite wisdom and infinite force, perfect harmony emerges, both in the physical realm and in the moral universe. Wisdom, power, and harmony constitute a single Masonic triad. They possess other and more profound significations, which may at some future time be unveiled to you. Regarding the ordinary and commonplace exegesis, it may be added that the wisdom of the architect is displayed in combining, as only a skillful architect can, and as God has done ubiquitously, for instance, in the tree, the human frame, the egg, the cells of the honeycomb, strength with grace, beauty, symmetry, proportion, lightness, and ornamentation. Such, too, is the perfection of the orator and the poet. To combine force, strength, and energy with grace of style, musical cadences, the beauty of figures, and the play and irradiation of imagination and fancy. Thus, in a state, the warlike and industrial force of the people, and their titanic strength, must be amalgamated with the beauty of the arts, the sciences, and the intellect, if that state is to scale the heights of excellence and its people remain truly free. Harmony in this, as in all things divine, material, and human, is the fruit of equilibrium, of the sympathy and counteraction of contraries, with a single wisdom above them holding the beam of the scales. To reconcile the moral law, human responsibility, and free will with the absolute power of God, and the existence of evil with his absolute wisdom, goodness, and mercy, these are the great enigmas of the SPHYNX. You entered the lodge between two columns. They represent the two which stood in the porch of the temple, on either side of the great eastern gateway. These pillars of bronze, 4 fingers' breadth in thickness, were, according to the most authoritative scriptural accounts, that in the first and that in the second book of Kings, confirmed in Jeremiah, 18 cubits high with a capital 5 cubits high. The shaft of each was 4 cubits in diameter. A cubit is 1 foot 707 thousandths. That is, the shaft of each was slightly over 30 feet 8 inches in height, the capital of each slightly over 8 feet 6 inches in height, and the diameter of the shaft 6 feet 10 inches. The capitals were enriched by pomegranates of bronze, covered by bronze network, and ornamented with wreaths of bronze, and appear to have imitated the shape of the seed vessel of the lotus or Egyptian lily, a sacred symbol to the Hindus and Egyptians. The pillar or column on the right or in the south was named, as the Hebrew word is rendered in our translation of the Bible, Jachin, and that on the left Boaz. Our translators state that the first word signifies he shall establish, and the second, in it, is strength. These columns were imitations by Kuram, the Tyrian artist, of the great columns consecrated to the winds and fire, located at the entrance to the famous Temple of Maukarth, in the city of Tyre. It is customary in lodges of the York Rite to observe a celestial globe on one and a terrestrial globe on the other. Yet these are not historically warranted if the objective is to imitate the original two columns of the temple. The symbolic meaning of these columns we shall leave for the present unexplained, adding only that entered apprentices keep their working tools in the column Jachin, and providing you with the etymology and literal meaning of the two names. The word Jachin in Hebrew was probably pronounced Yakayan and signified, as a verbal noun, he that strengthens, and thence, firm, stable, upright. The word Boaz is Baz, which signifies strong, strength, power, might, refuge, source of strength, a fort. The prefix signifies with or in, and gives the word the force of the Latin gerund, roberando, strengthening. The former word also signifies he will establish or plant in an erect position, from the verb kuin, he stood erect. It probably denoted active and vivifying energy and force, and Boaz, stability and permanence in the passive sense. The dimensions of the lodge, our brethren of the York Rite assert, are unlimited, and its covering no less than the canopy of heaven. To this object, they maintain, the mason's mind is continually directed, and thither he hopes at last to arrive by the aid of the theological ladder which Jacob in his vision saw ascending from earth to heaven, the three principal rounds of which are designated faith, hope, and charity, and which admonish us to have faith in God, hope in immortality, and charity toward all mankind. Accordingly, a ladder, sometimes with 9 rounds, is depicted on the chart, resting at the bottom on the earth, its top in the clouds, the stars shining above it. And this is deemed to represent that mystic ladder which Jacob saw in his dream, set up on the earth, with the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon it. The addition of the 3 principal rounds to the symbolism is wholly modern and incongruous. The ancients reckoned 7 planets, thus arranged: the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. There were 7 heavens and 7 spheres of these planets. On all the monuments of Mithras are 7 altars or pyres, consecrated to the 7 planets, as were the 7 lamps of the golden candelabrum in the temple. That these represented the planets we are assured by Clemens of Alexandria in his Stramata, and by Philo Judaeus. To return to its source in the infinite, the human soul, the ancients held, was compelled to ascend, as it had descended, through the 7 spheres. The ladder by which it reascends has, according to Marsilius Ficinus, in his commentary on the Ennead of Plotinus, 7 degrees or steps, and in the Mysteries of Mithras, carried to Rome under the emperors, the ladder, with its 7 rounds, was a symbol referring to this ascent through the spheres of the 7 planets. Jacob saw the spirits of God ascending and descending on it, and above it the deity himself. The Mithraic mysteries were celebrated in caves, where gates were marked at the 4 equinoctial and solstitial points of the zodiac, and the 7 planetary spheres were represented, which souls must of necessity traverse in descending from the heaven of the fixed stars to the elements that envelop the earth. And 7 gates were marked, 1 for each planet, through which they pass in descending or returning. We learn this from Celsus in Origen, who states that the symbolic image of this passage among the stars, used in the Mithraic mysteries, was a ladder reaching from earth to heaven, divided into 7 steps or stages, to each of which was a gate, and at the summit an 8th one, that of the fixed stars. The symbol was identical to that of the 7 stages of Borsippa, the pyramid of vitrified brick, near Babylon, built of 7 stages, each of a different color. In the Mithraic ceremonies, the candidate underwent 7 stages of initiation, passing through many fearful trials, and of these the high ladder with 7 rounds or steps was the symbol. You view the lodge, its details, and its ornaments by its lights. You have already heard what these lights, the greater and lesser, are said to be, and how they are discussed by our brethren of the York Rite. The Holy Bible, square, and compasses are not only styled the great lights in masonry, but they are also technically termed the furniture of the lodge, and, as you have seen, it is held that there is no lodge without them. This has sometimes been made a pretext for excluding Jews from our lodges, because they cannot regard the New Testament as a holy book. The Bible is an indispensable part of the furniture of a Christian lodge, only because it is the sacred book of the Christian religion. The Hebrew Pentateuch within a Hebraic lodge, and the Quran within a Mohammedan one, rightfully claim their place upon the altar. One of these, in conjunction with the square and compass, when rightly comprehended, constitutes the great lights by which a Mason is bound to walk and labor. The candidate's obligation is invariably administered upon the sacred volume or volumes of his particular faith, ensuring he regards the vow as of the utmost solemnity and binding force. It was for this reason alone that inquiry was made regarding your religious affiliation. Beyond this, we hold no concern for your theological creed. The square comprises a right angle, generated by the intersection of 2 right lines. It is applicable strictly to a plane surface and pertains exclusively to geometry, specifically earth measurement, and that branch of trigonometry concerned solely with planes and the terrestrial sphere, which the ancients conceived to be flat. The compass delineates circles and pertains to spherical trigonometry, the science governing the spheres and the heavens. Consequently, the former serves as an emblem of matters concerning the earth and the body, while the latter represents those concerning the heavens and the soul. Nevertheless, the compass finds utility even in plane trigonometry, such as in the erection of perpendiculars. Thus, you are reminded that, although in this degree both points of the compass remain concealed beneath the square, signifying that you are currently engaged only with the moral and political interpretations of the symbols rather than their philosophical and spiritual significations, the divine perpetually mingles with the human, the spiritual interlaces with the earthly, and a spiritual essence resides within the most mundane duties of existence. The nations are not merely bodies politic but also souls politic. Woe betide that people which, in sole pursuit of the material, falls into oblivion regarding its soul. In such an event, we witness a race petrified in dogma, presupposing the absence of a soul and the existence only of memory and instinct, or otherwise demoralized by lucre. Such a disposition can never spearhead civilization. Genuflection before an idol or the dollar atrophies the muscle that walks and the will that moves. Absorption in the hieratic or the mercantile diminishes the radiance of a people, contracts its horizon by depressing its elevation, and divests it of that comprehension of the universal aim, simultaneously human and divine, which characterizes the missionary nations. A free people, oblivious to the necessity of nurturing its soul, dedicates its entire energy to material advancement. Should it wage war, it does so merely to subserve its commercial interests. The citizenry mimics the state, regarding wealth, pomp, and luxury as the supreme goods of life. Such a nation generates wealth with rapidity but distributes it inequitably. Thence arise the 2 extremes of monstrous opulence and monstrous misery. All enjoyment accrues to the few, while all privation falls to the remainder, that is to say, to the populace. Privilege, exception, monopoly, and feudality spring forth from labor itself. A false and perilous situation which, reducing labor to a blinded and fettered cyclops, whether in the mine, at the forge, in the workshop, at the loom, in the field, amidst poisonous fumes, in miasmatic cells, or within unventilated factories, founds public power upon private misery and roots the greatness of the state in the suffering of the individual. It is an ill-constituted greatness, wherein all material elements are combined yet into which no moral element enters. If a people, like a star, possesses the right of eclipse, the light ought ultimately to return. The eclipse must not degenerate into perpetual night. You have been instructed that the three lesser or sublime lights are the sun, the moon, and the master of the lodge. You have heard the assertions of our brethren of the York Rite regarding them, and the rationale for their designation as lights of the lodge. However, the sun and moon illuminate the lodge in no literal sense, unless it be symbolically. In that case, they are not the lights themselves, but rather the representatives of those things they symbolize. Yet, of what they are symbols, the Mason in that rite remains uninformed. Nor does the moon govern the night with any true regularity. The sun serves as the ancient symbol of the life-giving and generative power of the deity. To the ancients, light was the primal cause of life, and God was the source from which all light flowed, the very essence of light, the invisible fire, developed as flame and manifested as light and splendor. The sun was his manifestation and visible image. Thus the Sabaeans, in worshipping the light god, appeared to worship the sun, in whom they perceived the manifestation of the deity. The moon functioned as the symbol of the passive capacity of nature to produce, the female principle, to which the life-giving power and energy corresponded as the male. It was the symbol of Isis, Astarte, and Artemis or Diana. The master of life was the supreme deity, transcending both and manifested through both. Zeus, the son of Saturn, become king of the gods. Horus, son of Osiris and Isis, become the master of life. Dionysos or Bacchus, like Mithras, become the author of light, life, and truth. The master of light and life, the sun, and the moon are symbolized in every lodge by the master and wardens. This imposes upon the master the duty to dispense light to the brethren, both personally and through the wardens, who act as his ministers. Thy sun, says Isaiah to Jerusalem, shall no more go down, neither shall thy moon withdraw itself. For the Lord shall be thine everlasting light, and the days of thy mourning shall be ended. Thy people also shall be all righteous. They shall inherit the land forever. Such is the archetype of a free people. Our northern ancestors worshipped this triune deity. Odin, the Almighty Father. Free, his wife, the emblem of universal matter. And Thor, his son, the mediator. Yet, above all these stood the supreme God, the author of all that existeth, the eternal, the ancient, the living and awful being, the searcher into concealed things, the being that never changeth. In the temple of Eleusis, a sanctuary illuminated solely by an aperture in the roof and representing the universe, images of the sun, moon, and Mercury were displayed. The sun and moon, observes the learned brother Delaunay, represent the two grand principles of all generation, the active and the passive, the male and the female. The sun represents the actual light. He pours his fecundating rays upon the moon. Both shed their light upon their offspring, the blazing star or Horus, and the three constitute the great equilateral triangle, in the center of which lies the omnific letter of the Kabbalah, by which creation is said to have been effected. The ornaments of a lodge are designated as the mosaic pavement, the indented tessel, and the blazing star. The mosaic pavement, checkered in squares or lozenges, is said to represent the ground floor of King Solomon's temple, and the indented tessel, that beautiful tessellated border which surrounded it. The blazing star in the center is described as an emblem of divine providence, commemorative of the star which appeared to guide the wise men of the East to the place of our Savior's nativity. However, no stone was visible within the temple. The walls were clad with planks of cedar, and the floor was overlaid with planks of fir. There exists no evidence that such a pavement or floor existed in the temple, nor such a bordering. In England, anciently, the tracing board was surrounded by an indented border, and it is only in America that such a border is placed around the mosaic pavement. The tesserae, indeed, are the squares or lozenges of the pavement itself. In England, furthermore, the indented or denticulate border is termed tessellated because it possesses 4 tassels, said to represent temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice. It was formerly termed the indented tassel, but this constitutes a misuse of nomenclature. It is, strictly speaking, a tessellated pavement encompassed by an indented border. The pavement, alternately black and white, symbolizes, whether intentionally or otherwise, the good and evil principles of the Egyptian and Persian creeds. It signifies the warfare of Michael and Satan, of the gods and titans of Balder and Lok. It represents the struggle between light and shadow, which is darkness, day and night, freedom and despotism, religious liberty and the arbitrary dogmas of a church that dictates thought to its devotees, whose pontiff claims infallibility, and whose council decretals are deemed gospel. Should the edges of this pavement be arranged in lozenges, they will necessarily be indented or denticulate, serrated like a saw. To bring the design to completion, a border is requisite. It is finalized with ornamental tassels at the corners. If these, along with the bordering, possess any symbolic significance, it is merely fanciful and arbitrary. To discern in the 5-pointed blazing star an allusion to divine providence is likewise fanciful. Further, to regard it as commemorative of the star reputed to have guided the Magi is to ascribe to it a meaning of comparatively modern origin. Originally, it represented Sirius or the dog star, the harbinger of the Nile's inundation, and the god Anubis, the companion of Isis in her quest for the body of Osiris, her brother and consort. Subsequently, it became the image of Horus, the son of Osiris, who was himself symbolized by the sun, the author of the seasons and the god of time. It represented the son of Isis, she being universal nature, while he was the primitive matter, the inexhaustible source of life, the spark of uncreated fire, and the universal seed of all beings. It was also Hermes, the master of learning, whose name in Greek corresponds to that of the god Mercury. It became the sacred and potent sign or character of the Magi, the Pentalpha, and stands as the significant emblem of liberty and freedom, blazing with a steady radiance amidst the weltering elements of good and evil in revolutions, promising serene skies and fertile seasons to the nations following the storms of change and tumult. In the east of the lodge, positioned above the master and enclosed within a triangle, resides the Hebrew letter Yod. In English and American lodges, the letter G is substituted for this as the initial of the word God, with as little justification as if the letter D, the initial of Dieu, were employed in French lodges in place of the proper character. Yod is, in the Kabbalah, the symbol of unity of the supreme deity, the first letter of the holy name, and also a symbol of the great Kabbalistic triads. To comprehend its mystic significations, one must consult the pages of the Sohar and Sifra de Zeniyatha, along with other Kabbalistic texts, and ponder deeply upon their import. It must suffice to state that it represents the creative energy of the deity, depicted as a point, and specifically that point situated in the center of the circle of immensity. For us in this degree, it is the symbol of that unmanifested deity, the Absolute, who possesses no name. Our French brethren position this letter Yod within the center of the blazing star. And in the old lectures our ancient English brethren stated, the blazing star or glory in the center refers us to that grand luminary, the sun, which enlightens the earth and by its genial influence dispenses blessings to mankind. In those same lectures they also designated it an emblem of prudence. The word prudentia implies, in its original and fullest signification, foresight. Accordingly, the blazing star has been regarded as an emblem of omniscience, or the all-seeing eye, which, to the Egyptian initiates, was the emblem of Osiris, the creator. With the Yod at its center, it bears the Kabbalistic meaning of divine energy, manifested as light, creating the universe. The jewels of the lodge are said to number 6. 3 are termed movable and 3 immovable. The square, the level, and the plumb were anciently and properly designated the movable jewels, for the reason that they pass from one brother to another. It is a modern innovation to term them immovable on the grounds that they must always be present in the lodge. The immovable jewels comprise the rough ashlar, the perfect ashlar or cubical stone, or, in certain rituals, the double cube, and the tracing board or trestle board. Regarding these jewels, our brethren of the York Rite observe, the square inculcates morality, the level equality, and the plumb rectitude of conduct. Their explanation regarding the immovable jewels may be consulted in their monitors. Our brethren of the York Rite state that there is represented in every well-governed lodge a certain point within a circle, the point representing an individual brother, and the circle the boundary line of his conduct, beyond which he is never to suffer his prejudices or passions to betray him. This does not constitute an interpretation of the symbols of Masonry. It is asserted by some, with a nearer approach to true interpretation, that the point within the circle represents God in the center of the universe. It is a common Egyptian symbol for the sun and Osiris, and is still employed as the astronomical sign of that great luminary. In the Kabbalah, the point is Yod, the creative energy of God, irradiating with light the circular space which God, the universal light, left vacant wherein to create the worlds, by withdrawing his substance of light back on all sides from a single point. Our brethren add that this circle is bordered by 2 perpendicular parallel lines, representing St. John the Baptist and St. John the Evangelist, and upon the vertex rests the Holy Scriptures, an open book. In traversing this circle, they maintain, we necessarily touch upon these 2 lines as well as upon the Holy Scriptures. And while a Mason keeps himself circumscribed within their precepts, it is impossible that he should materially err. It would be a waste of time to comment upon this. Some writers have conjectured that the parallel lines represent the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn, which the sun alternately touches at the summer and winter solstices. Yet, the tropics are not perpendicular lines, and the notion is merely fanciful. If the parallel lines ever belonged to the ancient symbol, they possessed some more recondite and fruitful meaning. They likely held the same import as the twin columns Jachin and Boaz. That meaning is not for the apprentice. The adept may discover it within the Kabbalah. The justice and mercy of God exist in equilibrium, and the result is harmony, for a single and perfect wisdom presides over both. The Holy Scriptures constitute an entirely modern addition to the symbol, much like the terrestrial and celestial globes upon the columns of the portico. Thus, the ancient symbol has been denaturalized by incongruous additions, such as that of Isis weeping over the broken column containing the remains of Osiris at Byblos. Masonry possesses its own decalogue, which stands as a law to its initiates. These are its 10 commandments. 1. Symbol. Earth. God is the eternal, omnipotent, immutable wisdom, supreme intelligence, and exhaustless love. Thou shalt adore, revere, and love him. Thou shalt honor him by practicing the virtues. 2. Symbol. Full moon. Thy religion shall be to do good because it is a pleasure unto thee, and not merely because it is a duty, that thou mayest become the friend of the wise man. Thou shalt obey his precepts. Thy soul is immortal. Thou shalt do nothing to degrade it. 3. Symbol. Earth. Thou shalt unceasingly war against vice. Thou shalt not do unto others that which thou wouldst not wish them to do unto thee. Thou shalt be submissive to thy fortunes, and keep burning the light of wisdom. 4. Symbol. Full moon. Thou shalt honor thy parents. Thou shalt pay respect and homage to the aged. Thou shalt instruct the young. Thou shalt protect and defend infancy and innocence. 5. Symbol. Earth. Thou shalt cherish thy wife and thy children. Thou shalt love thy country and obey its laws. 6. Symbol. Full moon. Thy friend shall be to thee a second self. Misfortune shall not estrange thee from him. Thou shalt do for his memory whatever thou wouldst do for him, were he living. 7. Symbol. Earth. Thou shalt avoid and flee from insincere friendships. Thou shalt in everything refrain from excess. Thou shalt fear to be the cause of a stain upon thy memory. 8. Symbol. Full moon. Thou shalt allow no passions to become thy master. Thou shalt make the passions of others profitable lessons to thyself. Thou shalt be indulgent to error. 9. Symbol. Earth. Thou shalt listen much. Thou shalt speak little. Thou shalt act with excellence. Thou shalt obliterate injuries from memory. Thou shalt return good for evil. Thou shalt not abuse either thy strength or thy superiority. 10. Symbol. Full moon. Thou shalt study to understand mankind, that thereby thou mayest learn to know thyself. Thou shalt ever pursue virtue. Thou shalt be just. Thou shalt shun idleness. Yet, the supreme commandment of Masonry is this: a new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another. He who claims to be in the light, yet hateth his brother, remaineth still in darkness. Such constitute the moral obligations of a Mason. However, it is also the incumbent duty of Masonry to assist in elevating the moral and intellectual plane of society, to coin knowledge and circulate ideas, to cultivate the growth of the youthful mind, and, through the instruction of axioms and the promulgation of positive laws, to gradually align the human race in harmony with its destinies. To this duty and labor the initiate is apprenticed. He must not imagine himself incapable of effect, and consequently, falling into despair, become inert. It is in this arena as it is in a man's daily existence. Many great deeds are performed within the minor struggles of life. There exists, we are told, a resolute though unseen bravery, which defends itself, foot to foot, in the obscurity, against the fatal invasion of necessity and baseness. There are noble and mysterious triumphs which no eye beholds, which no renown rewards, and which no flourish of trumpets salutes. Life, misfortune, isolation, abandonment, and poverty are battlefields that possess their own heroes, heroes obscure, yet sometimes greater than those who achieve illustration. The mason should struggle in like manner, and with equal valor, against those encroachments of necessity and baseness which afflict nations as well as individuals. He should confront them, likewise, foot to foot, even in the darkness, and protest against national wrongs and follies, against usurpation, and against the first incursions of that hydra, tyranny. There is no eloquence more sovereign than truth in indignation. It is more arduous for a people to preserve their freedom than to acquire it. The protests of truth are perpetually required. Continually the right must protest against the fact. There resides, in truth, eternity in the right. The mason should serve as the priest and soldier of that right. Should his country be despoiled of her liberties, he must still not despair. The protest of the right against the fact persists forever. The spoliation of a people never becomes prescriptive. The reclamation of its rights is barred by no duration of time. Warsaw can no more be Tartar than Venice can be Teutonic. A people may endure military usurpation, and subjugated states may kneel to states and wear the yoke while under the stress of necessity. But when that necessity vanishes, if the people remain fit for freedom, the submerged country will rise to the surface and reappear, and tyranny shall be adjudged by history to have murdered its victims. Whatever transpires, we should maintain faith in the justice and overruling wisdom of God, hope for the future, and loving kindness for those in error. God makes his will visible to men through events, an obscure text written in a mysterious language. Men forthwith construct their translations of it. Hasty, incorrect, replete with faults, omissions, and misreadings. We perceive but a short distance along the arc of the great circle. Few minds comprehend the divine tongue. The most sagacious, the most calm, and the most profound decipher the hieroglyphs slowly. And when they arrive with their text, perhaps the need has long since passed, and there are already 20 translations in the public square, the most incorrect being, naturally, the most accepted and popular. From each translation a party is born, and from each misreading a faction. Each party believes or pretends that it holds the only true text, and each faction believes or pretends that it alone possesses the light. Moreover, factions are blind men who aim straight. Errors serve as excellent projectiles, striking skillfully and with all the violence that springs from false reasoning, wherever a want of logic in those who defend the right, like a defect in a cuirass, renders them vulnerable. Thus it is that we shall often be discomfited in combating error before the people. Antæus long resisted Hercules, and the heads of the Hydra grew as rapidly as they were severed. It is absurd to assert that error, once wounded, writhes in pain and dies amidst her worshippers. Truth conquers slowly. There exists a wondrous vitality in error. Truth, indeed, for the most part, shoots over the heads of the masses. Or if an error is prostrated for a moment, it rises again in an instant as vigorous as ever. It will not die when the brains are dashed out, and the most stupid and irrational errors are often the longest lived. Nevertheless, Masonry, which constitutes morality and philosophy, must not cease to perform its duty. We never know at what moment success awaits our efforts, generally when most unexpected, nor with what effect our efforts are or are not to be attended. Whether we succeed or Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.